Hi friends, welcome back to Inspo English. Friends, I call your attention to the last 5 videos that I have posted. 2 were worksheets and the next 2 were the answer keys to the worksheet on direct and indirect speech. And the last one was a short speech for all those who love children. November 14th, Children's Day being very near. Hope everyone will enjoy listening to that. Okay, today let's come to a new topic which is very important, relevant as far as anyone who attends a public exam, entrance exam or a board exam or PSC exam, anything of that sort. And that is voice, active and passive. What do you mean by active voice and passive voice? First of all, let me tell you, the term voice is actually related to one of the parts of speech. You know what are the parts of speech? 8 of them are there. Noun, pronoun, adjective, one group. Then verb, adverb, second group. Third group, preposition, conjunction and interjection. Out of this, voice is related to verb. Verb means action. Okay. So we can say a verb is in the active voice when the doer of the action or the subject is active. And a verb is in the passive voice when the subject receives an action or the action comes from the object to the subject. So in the active voice, the action goes from the subject to the object, whereas in the passive voice, the subject receives the action or the action comes from the object to the subject. And of course, there are other changes that is related to tense. It requires a separate session to explain it. So we will do that in a separate video. Today, let's analyze a sentence and see actually what is there in active voice and passive voice. Okay. Here a short sentence is given. I write a story. Here I is the subject and write is the object and a story is the object. Okay. Here it is, should be a verb. I write a story. I is the subject, write is the verb and a story is the object. So the sentence is in the SVO pattern, subject, verb, object. That is the normal order of a sentence. Okay. And what about the passive voice? So this is active and this one is passive. A story is written by me. See here, actually the subject, the order of the sentence, the pattern of the sentence is the same. Subject, verb, object. Here object actually works like an agent. Okay, doer of the action, like an agent. So sentence is in the SVO pattern. But the difference is that the subject receives the action. Let's go back again. See, in the active voice, the subject does something and the action goes from the subject to the object. Whereas in the passive voice, the subject receives the action or the action comes from the object to the subject. Why? Because the subject in the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice and the object in the active voice becomes the subject in the passive voice. So these are the 2 important changes that happen here. And then of course there is one verb here, write, and that has become is written. Because the sentence is in present tense, so it is written. I told you we need a separate session to explain the change of tense when we change a sentence from active voice to passive voice. So these are the important things that you have to keep in your mind. Verb active means the subject is active. Verb passive means the subject is passive. And in the active voice, the action goes from the subject to the object, whereas in the passive voice, the subject receives the action, or the action comes from the object to the subject, because the subject in the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice, and the object in the active voice becomes the subject in the passive voice. And coming to the clear explanation of what is active voice and passive voice. A verb is in the active voice when we say that the person or thing denoted by the subject does something. A verb is in the passive voice when we say that the person or thing denoted by the subject receives an action, or the action comes from the object to the subject. Because I told you, the subject in the active voice becomes the object in the passive voice, and the object in the active voice becomes the subject in the passive voice. Sometimes this object can be plural. Instead of story, it can be stories. Okay, we may remove this a. I write stories. I write. Instead of saying I write a story, we may say I write stories. In that case, a story is written becomes stories are written. That's why I told you it needs a separate session to explain all that. We will come to that in the next video. Let me wind up. Coming to the definition of what is a voice in that case. What is a voice? What is a voice? Voice means a verb is in the active voice when we say that the person or thing denoted by the subject does something, or a verb is in the passive voice when we say that the person or thing denoted by the subject receives an action. Or in other words, we can say voice is that form of the verb which tells us whether the person or thing denoted by the subject does something, or whether something is done to the person or thing denoted by the subject. As we have already learned in the topic tenses, okay, if you haven't gone through the videos, please go through that. We have come across some 12 tenses. Present tense we have 4 different forms, past tense also we have 4, and future tense also we have 4. So total 3 into 4, 12 tense forms. But in the passive form we have only 9 tense forms. Okay, or we can say that only 9 of the tenses are changed from active voice to passive voice. Formerly we had actually 8 only. Nowadays we have 9. Lately we have added one more, and that is future continuous tense. We will come into all the details in the next video. Hope this video will be very useful to you. Watch it, and thank you. Goodbye.